Annabelle, can we put the first screen? Yeah, so we can start letting people in. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start recording. 일 따라 이맛이 온다. Just trying to say got it. You can take this. No, that's me.
Welcome, everyone. Please make sure to keep yourself muted. Hello, nice to see you. Please make sure to keep yourself muted. Well, welcome, everyone. We will begin shortly. We ask that everyone stay muted throughout the meeting. Thank you so much. There is a note that we not mute the interpreters. I'm just saying this out loud so that we Hello, everyone. Again, before we start, we have some general housekeeping to go over very quickly, and everyone will stay muted throughout the whole meeting. And though, of course, the chat is going to remain open. Yes, please stay muted. And we ask that everyone keep to our guidelines. We have this link in the chat. I think many of you are already aware of it. But our goal is to make the space as inclusive and productive as possible. We will remove anyone from the meeting if they're not following our guidelines. To assure a safe environment founded in respect and inclusivity, we have outlined our principles, and they apply not only to this space, but to all the forum, NGO CSW forum spaces and events. And we've always had the open Zoom meetings. We haven't had webinars because we thought, we wanted everyone to feel a part of the program. And so we really would like to continue doing this.
Yeah, I'd like to add that we have interpretation in Spanish and French. You can choose your language at the bottom of the screen. Look for the globe. And under the globe, you'll find the word interpretation. Click on the globe and select your language of choice. Please be sure to engage in the chat. Tell us who you are and where you're joining from. Also, a reminder to our speakers to be aware of the interpreters and not speak too quickly. And that's something that I am guilty of. So please, let's show the interpreters some respect. I'm going to pass it over to my co-chair, Ivy.
Welcome to the NGO CSW68 Forum Consultation Day. This officially opens our forum of the 68th session of CSW. Yay! So As expressed in our forum handbook letter, Pamela and I really welcome you with open arms and a deep bow of respect to each of you, not only as participants of the NGO CSW68 Forum, but in the contributions you make for the sake of women and girls and all their diversity everywhere. The NGO Committee on the Status of Women New York, as most of you know, organizes a civil society engagement during the CSW. All of it, actually, we engage civil society, and we take pride in the heart and sweat of most of us as volunteers to work day and night to offer the 2-week forum to all of you. In fact, our planning starts technically in the summer during our executive committee retreat. We can continue this work because of you. We know how critical it is to have civil society voices at the UN.
Again, greetings. We are so pleased to be with you all this morning for us to usher you into the NGO CSW68 Forum. As my co-chair Ivy shared, we've planned this entire year with a very small staff to bring you this special forum. This year has been a bit bumpy with our brand new platform and with a new, small but mighty staff. I'd like to acknowledge our executive committee members, who you can identify with the forum Zoom background, our mighty coordinators, Annabelle and Rachel, our interns, and our magnificent forum producer, Hudi Gudalekian, former NGO CSW chair, for their efforts in bringing the NGO CSW68 Forum to fruition. And can we give them a round of applause? Thank you. So we're going to start today's forum with a video message from His Excellency, the Honorable Ambassador Dennis Francis, the President of the General Assembly. It's muted. Please start again. And you have to be sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by expressing my sincere gratitude to the NGO Committee on the Status of Women in New York for their kind invitation to address you all today. As the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women is about to begin, we remain united in our unwavering commitment to the promotion of gender equality and the advancement of women's rights on a global scale. The late Secretary General Kofi Annan once said, "Gender equality is more than a goal in its own right. It is a precondition for meeting the challenge of reducing poverty, promoting sustainable development, and building good governance." End quote. We must start our conversation today by recognizing the pivotal role that women play in the realization of the United Nations goals. However, despite their indispensable contributions, women continue to be subjected to demeaning and deleterious patterns of treatment. This is of proportions so vast that only urgent, comprehensive structural action can effectively dismantle the systemic barriers women are so relentlessly forced to overcome. Now more than ever, we rely on the voices of civil society, that is, your voices, to advance women's empowerment and achieve full gender equality, a mission that transcends the capacity of any single member state, but realistically requires a multi-stakeholder approach. The NGO CSW Forum presents a unique platform to advance the gender agenda, both within the confines of the Commission and beyond. Throughout my presidency, I have worked tirelessly alongside my special advisor for gender equality and women's empowerment, and together with my advisory board on gender equality, to integrate a gender perspective across all General Assembly activities. I am thrilled to share upcoming initiatives aimed at integrating gender perspectives and promoting gender equality around International Women's Day and this year's edition of the Commission on the Status of Women. Last Thursday, we successfully hosted a special barbershop edition of my GAP Dialogues, involving a conversation with male permanent representatives on the role of men as agents of change in achieving gender equality. Also, I am looking forward to hosting a high-level side event during the CSW, focusing on closing the gender gap in education on the 12th of March. As president, I remain committed to promoting gender mainstreaming in the UN system and beyond. The upcoming Summit of the Future presents an important opportunity for the world leaders to forge a new global consensus and catalyze transformative actions towards sustainable development. And it is critical that a gender lens is reflected throughout the negotiating process. This summit also offers an opportunity to reassess and enhance global governance, including the international financial system, to bridge the unjust disparity between the global North and the South. Such endeavors are especially vital considering this year's CSW theme. Indeed, realizing genuine gender empowerment demands for all women to be included in breaking the glass ceiling and leaving no woman behind. Moreover, negotiations on the Global Digital Compact and the Declaration on Future Generations offer powerful avenues to enshrine the rights of women and girls into the Summit of the Future's outcome documents. I urge all stakeholders to actively participate and engage meaningfully in the shaping of the future we envision, one where gender equality lies at the heart of our aspirations. We need your expertise and invaluable insights. Together, let us strive for a future where gender equality catalyzes positive change across all the SDGs. I extend my best wishes for a successful forum. I thank you.
And we certainly do express our appreciation to the office of the President of the General Assembly. At this time, Her Excellency, Ambassador Paula Narvaez Ojeda, ECOSOC President, will provide her insights regarding CSW68.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this important meeting. I would like to express my sincere appreciation for the effort you are doing to have a successful CSW. I hope you can hear me well, Pamela.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, Mr. President of the General Assembly, Honorable Ambassador Dennis Francis, Mrs. Sima Bahous, Executive Director of UN Women, Mr. Antonio Manuel Revilla, Permanent Representative of the Philippines to the United Nations, Mrs. Ivy Koch and Mrs. Pamela Morgan, NGO CSW New York co-chairs, representative of UN systems and NGOs, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to join you. I'm sorry, someone has the mic open. Okay. Thank you for inviting me to join you today at NGO CSW68 Consultation Day. It is inspiring to engage with representatives of civil society who are so committed to achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. March 8 is a significant day for us all. International Women's Day serves as a reminder of the amazing things that women and girls have accomplished and the strides they have made in breaking barriers and driving progress toward a more equal world. Yes, it is also a moment for reflection on how much more needs to be done. We all know the steps that we need to take. More effective gender-responsive policies must be enacted, supported by needed financing and strengthening institutions to ensure that the rights of women and girls are protected and enhanced. Over the coming days, the CSW will be an opportunity to dive into policy innovations and solutions. However, today, I would like to speak to the integral role of civil society in advancing women's empowerment. NGOs play a crucial role to promote women's rights worldwide. You provide vital support services such as legal aid, healthcare, education, and many others to women and girls in marginalized communities. By raising awareness, mobilizing communities, and amplifying the voices of women, you contribute significantly to creating a more inclusive and equitable society where every woman and girl can thrive. Through all types of work, including advocacy, policy analysis, and program implementation, you are on the front lines of realizing SDG 5 and mainstreaming gender equality across the SDGs. In my capacity as president of the ECOSOC, I can personally attest to how the commitment of organized civil society contributes to revitalizing the Sustainable Development Agenda. Recently, I participated in the 6th session of the UN Environment Assembly in Kenya, where I engaged with youth and civil society representatives to jointly identify opportunities for collaboration with other stakeholders, including governments, civil society organizations, and the private sector, to leverage their collective expertise and resources in addressing global challenges. As president of the ECOSOC, I'm dedicated to ensuring that the Council serves as a unique platform for inclusive dialogue with NGOs and the UN system. You are holding countries accountable and pushing governments to aspire for more. You are placing a spotlight on the realities of women and girls across the world who are navigating some of the most difficult circumstances, while maintaining hope that their potentials can be realized. And you are amplifying the voices of those communities that so often go unheard. The Council recognizes your important work and priorities, the role of stakeholders and civil societies in all its activities. 2024 will be an important opportunity through the work of the Council and toward the Summit of the Future to advance gender perspectives. The Financing for Development Forum in April will engage in discussions on all the chapters of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, in addition to the reform of the international financial architecture, SDG stimulus, and ambitions for FFD4. This will be an important opportunity to engage the outcomes of the CSW and gender financing. The ECOSOC Youth Forum is also in April. We'll engage young people in discussions on how to scale up the implementation of the SDGs through youth-led and focused policies, including for young women and girls. And the High-Level Political Forum in July will be an opportunity to hear from approximately 40 countries on the work they are doing to achieve the SDGs, including on gender mainstreaming. It will also feature thematic sessions on the SDGs under review, each of which are critical to the well-being of women and girls. An open call for written statements for the 2024 ECOSOC high-level segment will be issued for NGOs in consultative status with ECOSOC. Ladies and gentlemen, the Council remains committed to engaging with all of you as partners as we together do our utmost to achieve sustainable development. I wish you successful meeting today and in coming days. I look forward to your continued engagement in the work of the Council and encourage you all to keep up the good work you are doing to ensure that gender equality becomes our lived reality. And I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, especially given that it's a Sunday and you just returned recently from Kenya. So we really appreciate your presence here today. So next we have the chair of the 68th session to the Commission on the Status of Women and permanent representative of the Philippines, His Excellency Antonio Manuel Revilla Lagdameo, and he has sent a video recording for today.
Good morning, colleagues and friends from civil society. I am pleased to take part in your preparatory meeting for the Commission on the Status of Women. The Commission values the engagement and participation of civil society. I am pleased to note that more than 10,600 NGO representatives have registered to participate in this session. This is a record number, significantly higher than last year's registration. This is indicative of the commitment of our civil society friends to women's rights and empowerment. In the letter I co-signed with UN Women Executive Director Sima Bahous, I requested all missions to include representatives of NGOs in the official delegations. I believe that NGOs and civil society bring their unique experiences and lessons learned to inform policymaking in the national, regional, and global arena. It is through civil society participation that the voices and insights of the women and girls who are otherwise unrepresented are heard in the halls of the UN. We also value the role of civil society in bringing back to the grassroots levels the ideas, norms, and data surfaced at the UN. It is through the cooperation between governments, UN entities, private sector, NGOs, and other stakeholders that impact reaches the ground and change happens in the lives of women and girls. The priority theme of the CSW this year is very important. The theme covers 3 critical areas for promoting gender equality: addressing poverty, strengthening institutions, and gender financing. Poverty continues to be the greatest global challenge for sustainable development. Women experience higher rates of poverty than men. Poverty also disproportionately affects women. The poverty-gender gap presents a tough barrier to the realization of true equality and inclusion. Strengthening institutions and gender financing are critical for the empowerment of women. As the saying goes, budget is the highest expression of policy. If we want gender equality and women empowerment, there must be political will to invest in women and girls. Fiscal space must be created or expanded for public entities to support gender and development policies. Institutions, including the private sector, academia, and other stakeholders, may be instrumental in capacity building for stronger institutions and must not be excluded. The Secretary General has called for a stimulus to scale up financing in order to accelerate progress towards the SDGs. By mobilizing resources and targeting investments and policies towards ending women's and girls' poverty, it is possible to move towards a new development paradigm centered on care for people and planet. The CSW this year is very important as it could inform the discussions for the Pact for the Future. The rights and well-being of women and girls must be taken into account in all initiatives to turbocharge the SDGs or to design a framework for the next generation. In development efforts, it must be borne in mind that poverty affects men and women differently. As reported by the Secretary General, the current food and energy crisis, as well as climate change and biodiversity loss, have intense impacts on women and girls. In the worst-case climate scenario, an additional 153.8 million women and girls could be pushed into poverty by 2050. Which increases the likelihood of career interruptions, lower earnings, and concentration in the informal sector. Time spent on unpaid care work result in older women having fewer savings, assets, and social protection benefits. Increasing women's participation in labor is often seen as a prerequisite for inclusive growth. Women's access to decent work and their protection from violence and harassment at work is not just a development concern, but also a human rights issue. This must also be considered in ILO issues, as well as in discussions on crime prevention and criminal justice. Having a gender lens is important in addressing the challenges of our time. The full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in governments, in the UN, and in society must be promoted and sustained. The CSW is a great venue for assessing the challenges that women continue to face and for finding ways to address these challenges. Thank you for your participation and for your support. I wish all of us a successful CSW.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I wrote this one down. Budget is the highest expression of policy. Absolutely. So next, I would like to introduce the Executive Director of UN Women, who is actually the third Executive Director that UN Women has had in its 14-year history, Sima Bahous. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sisters, friends, fellow feminists. It is always an honor for me to join you in this space ahead of the opening of the Commission on the Status of Women. This year, I welcome the new co-chairs of the NGO CSW New York, Pamela Morgan and Ivy Coeg, and look forward to the continued strengthening of our partnership. Friends, CSW takes place at a different time and very difficult time. Conflict threatens to disrupt the very fabric of our humanity. As conflict, fragmentation, and fear are on the rise, it is women and girls who suffer the most. We see this in Sudan, in Afghanistan, in Myanmar, in Ukraine, the DRC, and in too many other places of the world where women are bearing the brunt of conflicts not of their making. And in Gaza, more than 9,000 women have been killed, many more buried under the rubble. Gaza needs an immediate humanitarian ceasefire now. This can no longer wait. Also, the world needs an urgent end to violence. Women and women's rights defenders continue to be attacked, in many instances to be killed for speaking up. Poverty remains a gendered phenomenon. Globally, more women than men live in poverty, with 1 in 10 women living in extreme poverty. Discrimination in all its forms, from race to sexual orientation, make it almost impossible for women and girls to escape the vicious cycle of inequality, economic deprivation, and violence. Globally, women eat less and eat last. If we do not take immediate actions on our climate inaction, this dire situation will worsen. 236 million more women and girls may have even less to eat by 2030. While gender equality remains underfunded, the pushback on women and their fundamental rights is well-resourced and powerful, fueled by anti-gender movements, de-democratization, restricted civic space, a breakdown of trust between people and state, and regressive policies and legislation. Looking at the state of the world through the eyes of women and girls makes the priority theme of this CSW crucial. CSW68 demands us to act with urgency and to invest in women and girls in the smartest and fastest way that pushes them out of poverty and into empowered across generation, across ethnicities, across continents. We need urgent action that transforms the economies of the world so they work for women. The multi-layered economic crisis proves that the current financial institutions are unfit for purpose. We need to transform the gender norms that make women less worthy than men in the labor market and elsewhere. We need well-resourced women's organizations to address poverty and the backlash against women and girls. It is you, the women's organizations, that are best placed to mobilize change. Still, you receive only 0.13% of the total official development assistance. CSW68 seeks to put a roadmap forward that looks at how we can stir the financial revolution we need to transform the economies of the world to work for women. Not an easy task. As you know best, the fight is still on for the advancement of women and girls around the world, and CSW, steered by you all, is here to ensure that it is won. I thank you all for being here, and most importantly, for never giving up fighting for your rights and the rights of others, for peace, for climate justice, for a better world for all people and planet. UN Women is here to make sure you will never fight alone. We stand with you and will always. I thank you, and I wish you success always.
Thank you so much, Sima, for those meaningful, powerful words. It's such an inspiration to us all.
Thank you.
I am so delighted to bring to the microphone Jillian Mantilla, who is an intersectional feminist advocate and spoken word poet who is joining us from Paris, France. Today, she will share her piece, I See You, which was written specifically for CSW68. Jillian, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Pamela. Growing up, I remember my mom, 5 feet tall and round-faced, my mom feigning surprise when she won yet another round of mahjong. My mom resigned in rehearsed rhythm, recounting how to immigrate from Philippines to USA meant trading her law degree for nurse's scrubs, how to plant seeds in new lands meant using one's own dreams as fertilizer. I think now of how it must have hurt me, 4 feet tall with the same round face, asking her, well, why didn't you try harder? Who taught a 7-year-old to wield such violence so skillfully, to say so innocently, the care you provide is worth less than the papers the politician shuffles, the words a judge proclaims, to somehow say with a smile, it's your fault. I now know it was not me, no more than it was her. I was taught in the school of Adam Smith, my playmate, his son, capitalism. It's why I am not fluent in my mother tongue, yet I know to speak in his maxims of maximum morality. The early bird catches the worm. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps, work hard, play hard. But the women are working hard, laboring the land, building the peace, keeping charge of the children, keeping full the belly of the north, saving the air, the trees, the earth, nurturing the then, the now, and the hopes of their nation. The saying goes, money speaks, wealth whispers, but what do the women say? We are saying, call the money back from vacation. We know the money is in paradise tax, dollars by the millions sent to bronze in the sun of offshore havens. We are saying take our rights off the market shelves, end the commercialization of our daughters' education, the conditionality of our life-saving medication. We are saying it is not me. It is the system of violence that we neutralize and call poverty, that we dub as innocently as debt servicing, as market rules. We are saying our economic autonomy is not a tool to end poverty. We are an end in and of ourselves. So to our policymakers, we share this invitation. How can you work harder? To the activists and the farmers, the caretakers, and all the invisible hands, I dream that the I see yous and the thank yous these next 2 weeks will one day come with justice, with reparations. And to my mother, who has restarted hearts, has soothed those that grieve, has taught me the value of care. To you, I say, I see you. Thank you.
Yay, if we were all together, you would hear applause. So, thank you, Jillian, so much. Money speaks. Call the money back from vacation. I love it. Thank you so much. It's so powerful. And so thank you for being here. A great segue, actually, into the meat of this program. We have an hour conversation that's going to now take place, and the person moderating that is going to be Lopa Banerjee, a very dear friend of ours, the chief of the Civil Society Division. And she'll moderate the expert panel. When she started at UN Women, it actually wasn't a division, it was a section. And so anyway, there's definitely been evolution there. And thank you very much for moderating this panel.
Thank you so much, Ivy, and greetings, warm greetings, feminists, activists, and leaders from all over the world that are joining this. Welcome to CSW 68. We are looking so very forward to seeing many of you here in person and so many of you continuing with your activism online. So we have 1 hour for this conversation. And the conversation is about 2024. What is at stake? What is at stake as the world reels and continues to reel from a crisis, from war, from conflict? What is at stake as 1 in 10 women continue to live in extreme poverty? What is at stake as the world goes to the polls? Nearly 2 billion women and girls will have the opportunity to vote in elections, whether local or national, across the world. They will have an opportunity to participate either as leaders, as women running for office, or being influenced or shaping the electoral agenda. So what is at stake at this consequential, crucial moment when we are discussing at the CSW the most critical aspects of gender equality, women's rights, and women's empowerment? Poverty, discrimination, inequality. And to have this conversation, we have an amazing panel. We have Esther Nyawira, who is from Femnet. She is a young women and girls policy officer. We have Mufida Haider, who is from Restless Development and is also an NGO CSW New York Youth Fellow. We have Samira Rafaela, who is a member of the European Parliament, and we have Marian Bethel, who is a member of the CEDAW committee. And so let me actually start with you, Mufida. Oh, my apologies. I see that we don't have Esther with us. My apologies. So we have a panel of 3 eminent and fierce leaders. And so let me start with you, Mufida. What is the way, what is the conversation? What should be the discussions at the CSW so that the discussions here are then taken forward into countries and communities as this world goes to the polls, so that these polls, this moment of democratic engagement, serves the women and girls of the world? Mufida.
Yeah, thank you for your question, and thank you for having me here. I think in this time, and starting with the question, what's at stake, we cannot disregard everything that's going on in the world. So despite the importance and going from the importance actually of CSW and these discussions behind the doors, reflecting on the policies and how all these policies are reflected on the grassroots organizations, grassroots activism, it's very important to take into consideration everything that's going on in the world. So as a person, as an activist, as a feminist, as someone who's Lebanese and based in Lebanon, I cannot talk about all of this without the 2 aspects. The first, taking into consideration the grassroots activism, and also what's happening in Gaza at the moment, and what's happening to the women. And we all know the statistics, so I'm not going to go into numbers, but when we look at that and we see how many women are being killed as we speak, we see how the violence is not only killing, which is maintaining the basic human rights and living in dignity. We cannot disregard the hygiene, the living in dignity, the health. When we talk about this, and we talk also about hunger, as it has been mentioned, as we know that women are paying the first and the foremost price. And also we have the Sudanese women, the Congolese women, the Iranian women of forced hijab. So I think when we talk and reflecting in the conversation of CSWs, we cannot definitely we need to look forward, and that's what keeps us going, but we cannot not take a pause, look back of what we have done, because otherwise I think we would have failed what our foremothers and our history and our fight that has been done. So we need to take this pause to hold ourselves accountable, to look what we have done and how are we going to take forward, and what do we owe these women who are being the first victim of each of these conflicts. So yeah, I think we need to start from there in order to actually look into how this can be reflected into our local whatever policies and implementation.
Thank you so much, Mufida, for those very, very important reflections. Let me turn to you, Marian. Lifting off from what Mufida just said, we need to take a pause. We need to be accountable. What are we saying to these women and girls of the world? So with that, what are the policy conversations? What are the policy responses that this CSW68 should be providing at this point in time, both in terms of accountability and in terms of being responsive to this moment in time that Mufida was saying? You are a member of the CEDAW committee. You can talk about accountability at this moment.
Thank you so very much, and good morning and greetings from the Bahamas. I'm here, and really it's an honor for me to be here with you, and I thank the organizers for inviting me to participate. And so just moving right into it, I'd like to acknowledge what Mufida has said, that it's very difficult to be here and not pay attention, specific attention to what is happening in Gaza at this moment, and the tragedy that it continues to unfold. And so if I respond directly to that, and I'd like to, I think one of the conversations, or a very important part of the conversation, must be women, peace, and security, the resolution of the Security Council from 2000, that 1325, that allows for and provides for women to participate fully in the prevention of conflict, for women to sit at the table in every country in regard to the drafting and implementation of national action plans concerning conflict and our role in conflict and our right to be at the decision-making table in regard to this whole issue. So I think this is a very important conversation that needs to be highlighted and amplified and implemented in every country, the issue of women, peace, and security, and what that means for us as leaders and participants in not only the resolution of peace, but also the prevention of conflict at the very beginning. So that's a very important part of it. I think there's also the issue around the broader issue of women in decision-making and leadership, period, that needs to be addressed. We're still not where we need to be in regard to our own domestic parliaments, our own regional governance. And so I want to say very clearly that I think we need to really hold this issue of substantive equality for all people, all of us, including women, or women at the forefront, women and girls. And so I'm talking about this fundamental principle of democracy that we lose sight of, and that is substantive equality for everybody, women and girls in particular, as we speak here. And so I come from a region that embraces what we call liberal democracy, where we speak to the issues of universal suffrage having been granted, self-determination, and those kinds of issues related to liberal democracy. But I think where women have participated from generations ago, the early 1900s, in the Caribbean, we have asked for an expansion of the democratization of democracy, of our communities in regard to not just the workplace and politics, formal politics, but in regard to the family, for one, in regard to our local communities, our religious institutions. These are specific areas in which democratization needs to take place. Political parties, these are all areas that require us looking at democracy in its granular ways, as opposed to just the domestic national aspect of democracy. Democracy in the family is critical. How do we navigate as women our families and the responsibilities and the multiple responsibilities we have in the family? So these are some of the conversations I'd like to see us. I want to make space for our other panelists to speak. And so these are some of the global and granular democracies that we need to pay attention to as we move forward to amplifying what we understand as gender equality and democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marian. And you've just hit it. You've just brought us to the number of the conversation, right? The idea of democracy at this point in time as an aspiration for collective action, for common good for all, as collective action for substantive equality for all. That very idea is at peril at this point in time, even with all of the democratic engagement that this moment in time is at with all of these elections. So with that, let me turn to you, Samira. You are a member of Parliament. Speak to this idea of what is required at this point in time so that we are able to look at that promise of democracy, to strengthen democracy from the perspective of addressing substantive equality, addressing discrimination, and for gender, for that link between gender equality and democracy to be strengthened, including at the CSW. Over.
Thank you very much, Lopa. And I don't hear you speaking anymore, so I'm just checking with you. Was that your full?
Sorry, I said I was turning the floor over to you. Did you not hear
Okay.
my question?
Yes, I did hear your question, but not the last part that you were giving the floor to me. So I wanted to check. Thank you very much, Lopa, and it's very nice seeing you. And also many thanks to Ivy and Pamela for organizing this very important conversation. Well, I think the discussions that we will have during CSW really need to translate into these concrete actions adopted by the policymakers and legislators. So it is very important that we have politicians, that we have legislators, that we have the CSO all participating, but also representatives of the government, because we need to follow up in a way and need to make sure that there is a visible campaign after CSW promoting the main and the most important outcomes. We need our male gender champions, very influential ambassadors also to carry out these results. Because indeed, it's going to be a very important year when we speak about democracy. So in light of the election year, I would say, we need to have serious conversations about legal frameworks to be implemented at state and regional level. Take, for example, on the gender pay gap, the quotas for the labor market, obviously they are needed. Making sure that we have more women at decision-making level and sitting at the tables. But we also need to have these very serious conversations on legislation, democracy versus the topic of SRHR. So the lack of access to safe and legal abortion in the US and the EU, throughout the world, we see that it's a problem at the moment. And it's also about feminist foreign policy. So we need to create these multilateral stakeholder dialogues in which we really discuss all these topics, because these are going to be very important in light of the elections, because there will be a lot of, democratic energy, but also momentum to make sure that we safeguard all these rights that all these generations have been fighting for so hard. Because there is a very worrying element coming in here, and that's on the anti-gender movements. So I'm also working on the strategy against these anti-gender movements, where we see that it's very needed that policymakers and legislators and politicians are aware of that when thinking about the solutions and the responses. So we need to speak about strengthening the role of the civil society organizations too, how to protect and support them, because there's this strategy going on also against the civil society organizations, the defunding strategy, I would say, coming from certain conservative powers that really make it a strategy to make sure that certain civil society organizations, but also the multilateral system is at stake. So I think if we really, want to link the topic of democracy and gender equality, then we need to have conversations combined with the facts and the numbers showing that we will all thrive and grow when we reach true gender equality. So it's the momentum now to highlight also and commend research being done on this. There are very famous researchers stating and saying that if you have both gender equality at home and at the labor market, our economies can truly flourish. So it's very important that we are going to have the facts-based discussions, because that's also part of this counter strategy against the ultra-conservative powers really trying to influence the political and the election agenda this year. So we need to make use of the democratic energy that's there, but at the same time, there's also this one momentum, I'd say, this year to really have these multilateral stakeholders conversations, and not only conversations, but to really build a multilateral stakeholder strategy to make sure that we can effectively couple democracy and strengthening gender equality.
Thank you so much, Samira. Mufida, speak to that. This aspect around, a multilateral strategy, this aspect around this policymakers are looking at this moment of pushback to align around pushing forward. Speak to that and tell us what you would like to see in terms of policymaker action at this CSW related to this.
Y- Yes, I think as we can see that we definitely need more women decision makers in these in politics and statistics. How despite we're already 2024, we have to go into this discussion, which is not likely. Sorry, was I cutting off because it showed that my internet was unstable? Okay, that's one of the things that affect our participation in many levels when you when you live in such countries. Anyway, so yeah, I was talking into the.
We are losing
to
Mufida.
high
We're
decision
losing
making.
you.
Okay.
Mufida, we are losing you.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Let me try to switch my.
Yes.
Okay, good. My connection is unstable. I was just like highlighting the idea that definitely there's a huge importance of having more women in a high decision-making position. It will be slow number of participation, and that we need to discuss this. And definitely there is a huge pushback, and it's very important that we.
Mufida, unfortunately, you're dropping off all the time. May I let me go to Marian, and I'll come back to you, Mufida, as hopefully your connection stabilizes. Maybe you want to just turn the video off so that we have a stable connection. I'll go to Marian, but I also want to ask all of the activists and advocates who are joining this conversation, please, if you have questions, put them on the chat, and any comments. I don't know, Ivy and Pamela, if we are able to take any questions through raised hands or whether through the chat. Let me know. But to you, Marian, I have the same question. You know, we strive. The CSW is a policy space, and CEDAW is an accountability space. What is that connection that we want to see, particularly around the priority theme of poverty, inequality, and financing, related to this moment when we want to see this on the electoral agenda in a manner that is pushing forward for gender equality? Over to you, Marian.
Well, thank you for that. I think that I'd like to pick up where Samir, one of the points that Samira made, and that was about the anti-gender ideology that is so prevalent right now, and how it is really obstructing and undermining or attempting to undermine the progress that we're making. So I think that policymakers really need to understand fundamentally the anti-gender ideology and what it is trying to unravel of the decades of work that we have done as women to move to this point. And so I think that many countries, including the country from which I am, have been buying into the anti-gender ideology for its own purposes. And so I think that's an important point of discussion that needs to take place. At the CEDAW level, yes, we are the treaty body that looks to each country to be accountable to us and to their citizens in terms of the implementation of the convention around women's rights. And so I think one of the things that needs to happen at the policy level is that, and one of the conversations at CSW is about the implementation of the recommendations that the treaty body CEDAW makes with each and every country around implementing laws, enforcing laws, legislation. It really is at that level of implementation that I think states parties are failing. It's not that, well, for some states parties, there is the issue of actually putting into place the legislation and framework, et cetera. But once that is done, there is still the problem of implementation and enforcement and accountability of perpetrators in regard to legislation. So, for example, if I take gender-based violence against women and girls, that is an area where some countries still need to draft legislation, comprehensive legislation. Where there is a comprehensive legislation, there is the issue of implementation, training of the judiciary, police officers to actually deliver on the freedom from gender-based violence. So there are many issues in regard to accountability that the state party still has to be vigilant about. I think there's one issue that I'd like to bring to the foreground, and that is the issue of what we call temporary special measures, which is a state tool that can be used to bridge this gap with gender equality, democracy, and the advancement of women's human rights. I mean, the tool of temporary special measures can be a tool for national development if used wisely, but it needs to be done in such a way that the political directorate really communicates with its citizens to state how temporary special measures work and how affirmative action on behalf of the disparities between women and men can actually advance women's equality, substantive equality, but also national development. And that conversation really has to happen, I think. And states parties are remiss in not using this tool of temporary special measures to bridge this gap of women's leadership, but not just women's leadership, but women's economic empowerment, freedom from gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive health rights. Temporary special measures can really be an effective tool if states parties would understand that this is not a discrimination against men to be used. I mean, the convention itself states very clearly that the use of temporary special measures is not discriminatory, but it is a tool to advance the agenda of women's human rights and national development. So I think that is one policy discussion that really needs to be delved into, and states parties really need to understand it in a different way, and not just as something offensive or to be afraid of, but that's something that can be effectively used in state hands.
Thank you so much, Marian. Mufida's, you're back. Let me give it back to you. You were in mid-sentence when you dropped off. Back to you, Mufida.
Yeah, sorry, power cut. Yeah, I was talking mainly about the importance of having more women in high decision-making positions, and like in 2024, we are still discussing this, and we can look at the percentages and we know how low it is. Definitely, there is a progress that we cannot like disregard at all, but there's also a huge kind of disappointment on the low participation. But at the same time, like if I look at the example of Lebanon, at many times the maybe the involvement is not like as a true engagement that came from the activism, but rather maybe, you know, just appointment. So just speaking about this is very important, and talking also about the pushbacks and how to fight it and how to ensure that we have effective participation. First, definitely resourcing and ensure because all the pushback is being fully resourced. So we need to ensure that women's participation is also being resourced in the same amount, and also to have a very inclusive and comprehensive approach in our work, to ensure, as Samira mentioned, that there is a huge importance to have everyone at the table. And by speaking about this inclusive way, the voices of the civil society, the grassroots, people with disabilities from the LGBTQ community, because there's a huge pushback and fight around this. So having an inclusive and comprehensive way will advance this. And yeah, that's it. I don't know if I might have missed part of the question or the discussion when I dropped off. So
where you have an opportunity to come back on it anytime. There are a number of questions on the chat, and they are all related to this aspect of pushing forward, push back, pushing forward, this kind of rollback. And the questions that, and the comments that you talked about, all three of you in different ways. You were talking about women's mobilization. You're talking about a comprehensive approach to women's leadership and inclusive way to build alliances, and this whole question around policy discussions that are focusing on substantive legislative frameworks of accountability, whether that is temporary special measures or other means of accountability. And that's the question at this point in time, right? The accountability on this issue, including now related to this moment of democracy and gender equality. Let me ask you, Samira, around this. You have been doing work around this within the European Parliament. So let me ask you to bring some of that in. And again, I want to go back to all three of you to say, table your key asks of policymakers at this point in time around these points that you're making. Over to you, Samira.
Thank you very much. So, like I said, I think now the most strongest response that we can give is to see how we can strongly create legal frameworks on a state, on a regional level, and how to also do that in cooperation with different multilateral organizations. Because, like I said, the civil society organization is also, I'd say the work is at stake because of this backlash that we are experiencing. Therefore, we also need to create, I think that's really the responsibility for policymakers to see if we can create alternative funding avenues, I'd say, for the CSO to stay protected and to stay encouraged to work on these very important topics that will only foster the emancipation of women in society. When it comes to the legal frameworks that I could work myself, for example, in the European Parliament, that's the so-called Pay Transparency Directive in the European Parliament. So we have now mandatory reporting for EU companies when it comes to the gender pay gap. I think we really need to work a lot on legal frameworks that are in the essence about accountability, but also about transparency. So, for example, with this Pay Transparency Directive, the whole essence of this new legislation is that we have been working on mandatory transparency. And often when we speak about the topic of poverty, there's also this lack of information and a lack of insight that women have. And therefore, you are only weakening their position because they don't have the strategic information, they don't have the relevant information, for example, to strengthen their own economic position. So that's I would say a best practice from the EU that we will keep working on, and that's also about accountability. And the second is, of course, the protection of the feminist foreign policy. So given the election results that we are expecting, I am also worried about the feminist foreign policy. So you see that when certain governments are infiltrated, I'd say, with the ultra-conservative powers, one of the first things they touch is feminist foreign policy. So here's also a challenge for the multilateral organizations to really think that through and to see, again, what kind of role the CSO here can play, but also what kind of alternative strategies we can build on to protect the whole essence of feminist foreign policy. Because I totally agree, when we look at conflict and war, women and girls are always the main and first affected and impacted, and meaning that they also need to sit at the decision-making table and the negotiating processes, for example, to help build up their country again. And that's exactly what feminist foreign policy is also pleading for. And I think the future when it comes to the legal frameworks is also that we really need to start working on temporarily quotas. So I know that there is a lot of discussion going on quotas, like, is this really the way to engage women? Is this really the way to select women? But you can also put that into place as a temporary measure to at least make sure that in certain sectors, in certain areas, at certain tables, we have enough women to be part of decision-making process. And I want to highlight two topics that I think are going to be really important for the future decision-making process and the policy agenda. Two topics. That is,
Samira, as you come in, as you're highlighting these two policy areas, I just want you to also focus on a question that has just come in, which is in terms of the SRHR issues and how do you look at young women advocating for that during and before the European elections? So if you can also respond to that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, okay, let me first respond to the SRHR issue. I mean, that's been I've done enormous work on that together with my team and advisors. And the reason why we really needed to dedicate a lot of time to the topic of SRHR, that's really a topic that at the moment is at stake because it's part of this targeting strategy that these anti-gender movements have. So take, for example, in the European Parliament, there is a movement of certain politicians that constantly want to amend out words like SRHR and gender. Also here in the EU, we have the issue of a lack of access to safe and legal abortion. Take, for example, what's happening in Poland, other member states, but even in Malta, it's forbidden. So this is going to be a very important part of the electoral campaign. To make sure that we keep funding CSO, that there are also direct and more efficient ways of funding the civil society organizations that can really help and stay close to women in need. If you look at the more global aspect of it, then I'm very much worried about the infiltration of ultra-conservative and far-right governments, that the first thing they will do is to touch upon that aspect. So the funding, making the funding available for SRHR related policies and projects. And this is something that we need to be very aware of, that if that happens, then what are the other creative alternative routes for keep funding projects that are related to SRHR. So that would be my warning and my advice. Then the last two topics that I would like to highlight for the future is really the health of women. So when it comes to gender-specific health issues, we really need to invest there because that has a strong link with poverty also. So for the policymakers to really think that through, how the lack of dedication coming from research, but also the medical community for gender-related health issues is affecting poverty. And the last point is on climate. We should not underestimate how climate at the moment is affecting also poverty, because there's a lot of energy poverty among women and girls that we really need solutions and policies for on a local level. The main victims now of energy poverty are women and girls.
Thank you, Samira. Thank you. Mufida, I want to come back to you with a particular question actually related to mobilizing, and how can movements across Turkey, Iran, Middle Eastern countries, etc., work in a combined strategy, but actually across the world, work in this combined strategy to address pushing forward for gender equality, also looking at this moment of democratic activism. I'll come to you, Mufida, but it would be good to hear on that also from you, Marion, and this is a question in the chat. So over to you, Mufida, on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think that there's no like kind of site that fits all, and that's the importance. Like despite we are talking about Iran and the Middle East and Lebanon, all the countries, but we need to take into consideration the contextualization. There's definitely a transnational movement that is taking place, that there's a lot of connections, a lot of work across the countries, and these kind of collaborations. But at the end, when it comes from the grassroots and from the organizations, people know the best, like they know their best interest and how to take forward and how to mobilize it. Because unfortunately, if we're talking about the policy level and about international frameworks, they are being used even on the local level to create some kind of, to use it for the backlash, like to use it to dismantle these movements. So I think it's very important to stick to these international frameworks, to stick to these laws, like, and understand them, and always go from the concept of rights cannot be divided. So at the end, as I mentioned, these movements know their best, and it's more coming from them. They know how to mobilize it the best and to move forward, and never give up the human rights laws, if I may say, because as we witness, we can see that there has been a lot of discussion about where are these human rights laws going, but I don't think the problem is with the laws themselves. So going forward, it's definitely important to work together, but at the same time have this kind of different strategies that best work on the local level.
Thank you, Mufida. And in fact, on that point, Marian, there is also a question, but I want to also ask you to reflect on, from where you sit, where you're listening to this, where you're hearing, CEDAW reports from countries, what are some of the successful strategies that one can draw upon and that one can share here, and that also can be reflected in the discussions at the CSW in order to define policy prescriptions from a place of what is working on the ground? Over to you, Marian.
Right. Well, I think one of the strongest aspects of the work that I do in regard to what you're asking is that we tend to address states parties in regard to the region from which they're from. So for example, if there are progressive or progressive policies or progressive frameworks, legislation, etc., in a particular country from a particular region, when that country comes before us, we can say to them, well, look at X state party and how it has addressed the issue of female genital mutilation, for example, okay, FGM. So I think one of the strengths from where I sit is that we do work regionally, and we take the practices from the region that are really working and ask states parties to look at those practices and see whether, or those are the legislation or the policies, and to see whether that can fit with what they are trying to do. So one of the strengths then is just this sort of overview that we have of different regions and how each region can help to bolster another country's move towards the advancement. And I think that's one of the strongest points that I can think of at this point, where we which speaks to the way in which we work as a CEDAW committee. And so we don't, for example, we would look at climate crisis, for example, and there are any number of small island developing states in the Caribbean, in Asia Pacific, etc., that are collaborating and working together to address issues of climate injustice and energy poverty and how to move forward. So I think at the global level, looking at it regionally and looking at the best practices that come out of each region and asking each country to make mention of that or revert to that in terms of how they wish to move forward is one of the areas in which I think sitting on the CEDAW committee really is an effective way forward.
Thank you, Marian. And any one of you to come in on this. There's a question that says, that's going back to the comment of the chair of the CSW, talking in terms of the investment in gender equality, and that the policy reflection of this in policy is the most effective tool. So how to look at ensuring that institutions, and that is also the priority theme, that how to ensure that institutions are actually prioritizing this investment, and what is it that should be in terms of this conversation at CSW. And that's the question. Any one of you to come in on that.
Great.
Did you want to come in, Marion, on that?
So we're talking about strong civil society institutions.
With the aspect about investing, whether that is in a strong civil society institutions and the women's movement, but investing in policy at an institutional level, so as to be able to reflect the commitment, the political commitment around on gender equality. How to center stage that at this point in time.
Right. Well, I think certainly at the CEDAW committee level, I mean, the role of NGOs and strong civil society institutions is critical to any democracy and democratization of different sectors of a country. And so we really engage with states parties on this issue of always incorporating and giving civil society, funding and the space that it needs, the democratic space it needs to do its work, so that it can hold governments accountable for its work under the CEDAW Convention, for example. And as we know, there is a shrinking civil society space as we speak in regard to what's happening globally. And so we can see the effect of that at the CEDAW committee level in terms of governments and their lack of engagement with civil society institutions. And in fact, their sometimes intimidation of women human rights defenders on the ground in regard to, let's say, climate crises or deforestations in certain countries. And so one of the policy commitments has to be the full engagement of civil society as a partner and also as an independent actors to do the work that they do to advance women's human rights and the democratization of society and the funding that is necessary to go with that. I mean, for example, civil society organizations really often fill in the gap where states parties do not do the work, particularly in regard to, let's say, gender-based violence and shelters for women, etc., and the kind of psychosocial counseling that civil society organizations provide. And so they take up the slack where governments don't do the work that they're supposed to do. So that kind of policy commitment to civil society organizations is very, very important to the work that we do and the world that we are looking for.
Mufida, I saw you nodding your head on to this. Come in with what you wanted to say.
Yes, no, I completely agree that there's a huge importance in investing into policies, and definitely it's different between country or another, but also like on the global scale, if I may say. But at the same time, at some point, sometimes policies are being more like, thrown in the drawer, if I may say, which should not be the case. So for advancing gender equality, and especially for speaking on the ground, it's very important to have this kind of, not the middle ground, but like ensure that the policies are there and also are being implemented, and not only, adding more policies. Let's also, I reiterate, to reflect and pause and look at the policies that we have. What are we implementing? What we are not implementing? And what we need to add or maybe amend, and where is the gap? Like what we have achieved. Like we need to focus more on this rather than just like having policies, despite the huge importance of policies.
Samira?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, first of all, budget is power. So we started also to experiment in the European Parliament with gender budgeting, but also gender mainstreaming, basically from every commission. So it doesn't matter the topic, but we should really promote gender mainstreaming for all kinds of topics and for all the legislation that's being made. And I think we need to have a strong campaign for gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting together. And then when it comes from a legislative perspective and politicians, they need to organize way more expert dialogues with the CSO. So making sure that there's not only a dialogue or an expert table, but really to see if we can create manifestos, pledges, policies together that on a legislative level can be implemented, so that you get it really in the DNA of institutions. I would also plead for more multilateral databases where we can share and learn about our best practices, experiences, in which we can all share relevant information among the multilateral organizations, often very much working on the same kind of topics, and poverty reduction here is one of them. But also for the CSO, I'd say there's also a challenge, and I would encourage it way more for CSO to scrutinize also the budget that politicians work with, that the multilateral organizations work with, so the CSO can really play a strong role in scrutinizing and analyzing the budget and policies that we work with.
Thank you, Samira.
And if I could just speak to something that Samira has just brought up, would that be okay, Lopa? Just to
yes, please come.
And it is the issue of data collection that we find at the CEDAW committee level is, I mean, across the board, most countries do not have the kind of data upon which to make the sound decisions of policy making or policies in practically every area. So we consistently ask, obviously, for disaggregated data on an intersectional basis that can really help to inform the policies. And so I think that's one of the weaknesses that we see time and time again for most countries is around the issue of collection of data and the usefulness of the data and how that data can be used to really be integrated into the policy to make it more effective. So that's one of the things that I wanted to just highlight.
Thank you, Marian. And we are coming to the end of this conversation. So let me ask you, as your closing, as a closing out comment, starting with you, Mufida. You know, there are so many critical issues that we need to be looking at in terms of this priority theme, in terms of the review theme on social protection, in terms of the emerging issue on gender equality and AI, and around this question of poverty, inequality, and financing for gender equality. So if I was to ask you, what would you like to be taking back with you in terms of a clear policy ask, in terms of a clear policy commitment from policymakers at this CSW? So that is one, in terms of what would you like to see, one big policy commitment that you want policymakers to make, and the complementarity to that, what of that will you take back into your community in terms of your action as an advocate, as someone who's at the forefront of mobilizing in terms of what you would like to mobilize around? So the same question to all three of you, starting with you, Mufida.
That's a really hard question, to be honest, because there are like many things that we aspire to, but honestly, I always take things back to the roots. And for me as a woman, and how I would aspire things to be accomplished. And I think the commitment, and that would kind of make me feel proud and happy, is that to see no discrimination at all. Like, and even when we talk about women's rights, not every woman in the world is being like, no one's free until all of us are free. So when I see this commitment that every single woman's right is taken into consideration, and that we will take the commitment to ceasefire in Gaza, to support women in Gaza, in Congo and Sudan, that would make my heart like, you know what, we did our job. at least the call for it, the call to action. As an advocate in yeah, I think seeing these policies into action would bring the belief back, and that I can spread around that we are going somewhere, and also to see this accountability in action. We can push forward. I mean, not push back. We don't want to push back at all. The last what we want to do.
Samira, your call to action and your call for commitment.
Thank you very much. Well, my call for action is really, I really stick also with the importance of data. So the facts and the numbers that we really need to put into the discussion, and make sure that also researchers they get more space and more means also to be part of that very important fact-based discussion. If we can truly work with solid data, indeed, just what was being mentioned before, then I truly think we can make more targeted solutions and more targeted policies. My call for action when it comes to the governments around the world is really to protect feminist foreign policy and to keep gender mainstreaming all the policies and outcomes that we have, because at the end we see that it doesn't matter about what topic you speak about. You see in most of the cases that women and girls are highly impacted by it, and I think gender mainstreaming is of absolute importance, and the protection of feminist foreign policy.
Thank you, Samira. Your call to action and your commitment, Mariam.
Yes. As I think that just about any topic of discussion that we can think of in terms of women's rights, etc., I think an intersectional approach. I think governments need to make to have a really clear intersectional approach in regard to any policy that they are drafting or want to implement around ethnicity, race, class, sexual orientation, disability, etc. That needs to be, I think, central to the thinking always, this intersectional approach. It has implications for reduction of poverty. It has implications for climate crisis and most conversations that we're engaged in. So an intersectional, a policy commitment that is about the intersectional approach. The other thing that I think, which is understated and not really held up front, is the issue of gender stereotyping. I think the root causes of gender stereotyping affect each and every category of right that we're talking about. And so the sort of blind views that don't take into account our biases, our gender stereotypes, I think can erode the kind of effectiveness that we can look for in policy implementation, unless the root causes of gender stereotyping and the kinds of, for example, if you're talking about the care economy, the gender stereotyping around women's responsibilities needs to be clearly assessed and understood in order to make the kind of policies that deal with revitalizing or recharging the whole care economy. So gender stereotyping and in the intersectional approach.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you very, very much. We have Gillian in her poem said, you know, what do the women say? And we have heard what the women say. Thank you so much to all of you. And my call to action as I turn this back to you, Ivy and Pamela, is echoing the call for the UN Secretary General: ceasefire. Ceasefire now, and standing in solidarity with all of those who are in the trenches doing the work. Ceasefire now, and end to war and conflict everywhere and in Gaza. Over to you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to all those who are in this call, and all of you who will be doing the amazing work over the next 2 weeks and beyond and all around the year. Back to you, Ivy and Pamela.
Thank you, Lopa. And thank you, panelists, Marian, Samira, Mufida. Actually, I think this is Pamela's part, but I just wanted to jump in and say thank you.
And I extend profound gratitude that the four of you made time to be with us today, to offer us those insightful reflections and encouraging words. And I think that we all have a lot to reflect on over the next 2 weeks as we move through CSW68. And at this time, we are extremely pleased to introduce the newly appointed UN Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director for Normative Support, United Nations System Coordination and Program Results at UN Women, Nayartai. And Nayartai, please take the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pamela. And again, to greet you. I just met you a few days ago with Ivy. I am so honored to be here. And I also want to thank all colleagues who are able to join. I am maybe 30 days on the roll and coming from the womb of civil society. As I step onto this role, I just want to say thank you all for the warm welcome, for your encouragement, for your advice, and for your insights. Only a few days ago, we were commemorating International Women's Day. So belated International Women's Day to all of us, and congratulations for the amazing organizing, mobilizing, engaging that we did on International Women's Day. As I also recognize the panel that has just happened, and thank you, Lopa, for moderating, and amazing to hear from Marion, from Mufida, and from Samira. And I also want to appreciate Esther Nyawira, who could not be with us for that session, and to continue to appreciate the perspective also that they bring. I have been given 10 minutes. And when the program was being designed and in consultation with the NGO CSW, I was very clear that I want to listen first. I want to listen first and then to share my perspectives, and also the amazing contributions in the chat, so that I can connect my perspective with the conversations that are happening, with the expectations that are there, with the analysis that you are forwarding, and with also the expectations on the UN and on member states. So let me at the outset say my heart bleeds when many of our sisters and young women are unable to be with us at the Commission on the Status of Women in person, even when they want to be present in person. They are not able to be here because some of them cannot simply afford a flight and accommodation in New York, the poverty we are talking about. Some are not able to be here because of the context of conflict they are in, the crisis they are in. The flights are not there. Our colleagues from Haiti were not able to be here on time. We've heard so many times about Gaza, the Sahel, Ukraine, Sudan. Some are not able to be here because they are in refugee camps and IDP camps. Some are not able to be here because they could not get a visa. Because we are talking about an equal world for which some are unable to access parts of that world. Inequality of opportunity is part of the reality of our context. And of course, appreciating the efforts that have been there this year to increase opportunities for visa access. Some are not able to be here because of patriarchy, because they could not get permission. They cannot get permission, or because they have care work, because there was no one to remain with the children. The barriers to participation are the same barriers that we'll be discussing today. Listening to the panel and connecting with the conversation that was in the chat is we are meeting and reflecting in the context of the Commission on the Status of Women's theme for this year, which is looking into the feminization of poverty. Not only does it have a female face, but also it is structurally, the economies are structured in a way that it perpetuates the insubordination of women and the inabilities of women to claim their full rights, including in their economic rights, and which then limits their social and political rights. So the conversation on poverty is not just about poverty, it is also about poverty and how the existence of poverty undermines, limits, and challenges women to claim and enjoy all other rights. And this is therefore a fundamental issue. SDG 1 is the same issue that was on the Beijing Priority 1 issues around poverty. The theme around the focus on institutions. It's listening to Marion talk from the CEDAW perspective. The focus on institutions is reminding us that it is the primary responsibility of the state to protect the human rights and to empower women and to reduce inequalities. That primary responsibility is being expressed in the need in our normative frameworks to have a perspective of the institutions. And we need to say, which are those institutions, which within the Commission on the Status of Women we are talking about. And those institutions are more than the national machineries for gender. Yes, they are the national machineries, but plus the accountability of the legislature has been raised severally. The issues around the other ministries, whether it's agriculture, finance, whether it's issues relating to intergovernmental institutions, the role of the independent human rights mechanism. So the theme of CSW is in itself linking, dismantling the inequalities related to poverty and accelerating progress, but also identifying who are the institutions. The third is the focus on financing. It has all been raised, and when we look at the draft agreed conclusions, the issues are there. What is critical is that there is a shared and agreed consensus by the 22nd of March on the fundamental underlying financing related issues and economic issues that must be addressed, whether it's global tax justice issues, whether it's gender justice in climate, it's issues of date, it's gender responsive budgeting, which the women's movement pushed for many years. The issues are there. They are known. The solutions are known. And therefore, it's the commitment of the member states to make it real. And of course, social protection, which is the review theme. And at times when we look at the social protection, it's more than what our public institutions provide, but also what the women in communities are providing. At times, women's movement is part of a social protection mechanism, picking the pieces with our shelters, So these are fundamental issues. And I want to connect on the big discussion on us going into elections this year. 1.3, 1.6 billion people voting.
Yeah, mommy. Yeah. I know. We're almost there.
60 countries going into elections. What does it mean? In relation to the theme of the year this year, it means 4 things. 1, women vote. Please do vote. Exercise your right to make the choices around a government and within the elections, push for issues of gender equality, women's rights and empowerment to be on the electoral agenda. It's very important. As soon as the governments are elected, push for issues of gender equality to be on the mandate of the newly elected institutions. And we have heard a very, very clear message from Samira. We have heard around the importance of feminist foreign policy. It means after elections, the governments that are elected, part of the commitment they should have is also relating to a feminist approach to foreign policy that places gender issues at the heart of their mandate in international relations, women, peace and security, the issues of gender equality in trade, the issues of gender equality in the multilateral mechanisms, and in the accountability of women's rights, including through CEDAW, or ratification of CEDAW, or removing the reservations on CEDAW. But it's also around us together today in this CSW, calling on an end to violence against women, including in elections. When elections are violent and discriminatory, they limit women's right to participate. They limit the opportunities for us to have women in decision-making who are going to move the post-CSW agenda forward. We need an election-free, a violent-free elections. I echo my executive director, Sima Bahous, for calling for an end to war everywhere, for calling for a humanitarian ceasefire now in Gaza so that life-saving provisions can reach the people, for calling for an end to impunity so that perpetrators of violence can be investigated and be punished. UN Women is unequivocal around protecting women's human rights. I want to also reflect on the issues around the very strong resistance to gender equality that has been expressed, whether it's expressed as a pushback discussion or it's a voices or states or individuals who are anti-gender movement. I step back and say what it is. First, it means there's something good which we are all doing. We are speaking out for equality. We are speaking up for non-discrimination. We are speaking up for inclusion of all people in all their diversities. We are speaking out on issues which were in Article 55 of the Charter of the founding the United Nations, that there should be no discrimination. So when we see the resistance, it's a resistance to the notion of non-discrimination. It's the foundation of our gender equality work, is non-discrimination. And therefore, it's also telling us that there's something good we are doing. It means we are pushing the transformation at the right level around right issues, the important issues, and patriarchy would resist. And therefore, we need to sharpen our strategies so that we go beyond naming the problem, but creating and co-creating solutions within which we can continue to assert for the empowerment of women, for the human rights for all, and for a world of peace in which there is justice and there's access to opportunities for all. That requires a re-strategizing and a stronger collaborative work together and closing ranks together to uphold the UN commitments to equality, to justice, to peace for all, because that is the first sentence of the Human Rights Charter is we the people. It doesn't say we the people of this color or that color. It doesn't say we the people of this age or that age. It doesn't say we the people living in that village or in that city. It doesn't say we the people of this sexual orientation or that sexual orientation. It says we the people. And therefore, our work as we advocate in the CSW, as we advocate for the agreed conclusions, we've together, as we engage with our member states, civil society saying, just respect the we the people. That we have rights, we have dignity, we need opportunities together and collectively. And in conclusion, conscious of my time, my request for the next 2 weeks are the following. My key asks to all of us is first, let's work together very strongly, very courageously and boldly, so that on the 22nd of March, we can dance together and that the member states would have agreed conclusions, which are strong, which are bold, which are forward-looking, so that they contribute to the Pact for the Future, the COP, and other mechanisms, and which are also actionable, so that the agreed conclusions can be applied in our countries, in our communities, and in our organizations. Let's connect solidly together. Let's connect together solidly in the next 2 weeks to ensure that we share the best practices and the voice and contributions of civil society influence the normative work. Thirdly, let's continue to call out for an end to violence and an end to war. It's important because war and violence against women and girls erodes the investments that we're talking about. And let's continue to celebrate and give visibility of women and women's organizations' own contribution into the agenda. And I want to really give a big shout out to all the feminist funds, the women's funds, the different foundations, the different individuals who continue to support the work of the women's movement and civil society, and those who continue to support our work at UN Women. I am just so grateful, and I appreciate that I could have this opportunity to interact with you. I'm looking forward to a bold engagement together within our collective spaces as we engage with the member states and support a strong normative standard whilst we are defending the gains that we've already made. Again, thank you so much and good morning. Best wishes with CSW.
Narvaez, thank you so much for your powerful, tender response to our magnificent panel. And yes, to the end of war and to the end of violence against women. As you told us when we met, you mean what you say, and you have the ability to say the things that inspire and empower. Your practical focus on women on the ground and your keen analysis of the fundamental issues facing women, of poverty and the primary responsibility of the states, the necessity of protecting the human rights of women, helps us to extend our understanding of the issues discussed in the panel. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. So to our dear audience, at this time, we're going to have a musical selection, What Happens When a Woman, and it's going to usher us into a 15-minute break. So we'll see you in 15 minutes.
What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when the woman takes power? What happens when she wears the crown? What happens when she What happened? That's the beat. Nobody. What happened when she said for her own to breathe? What happened when you won't take power? What happened when she won't back down? What happened when the woman takes power? What happened? What happened? What happened when the woman takes power? What happened when she won't back down? What happened when the woman takes power? What happened when she ready to run? Oh, be right tomorrow. Be tomorrow. We are one. We are one. We just begun. Oh, we are tomorrow. Baby, we are one. We are one. We just begun. She won't back down. What happened when the woman takes power? What happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? What happened when she wears the crown?
Hello, Maiten and interpreters, are you all ready? I hope everyone can add a nice little break.
I think we have about 3 minutes to get started. I'm so looking forward to this panel and to hear the exciting, fresh voices of youth. So we'll introduce you in just a minute.
My screen is being wonky, but I think we can start whenever you're all ready.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's time for us to get started with the second panel. And I am so pleased to introduce our NGO CSW New York Dream Team coordinators, Annabelle and Rachel. And these two young women stepped up in December to work with us. And without their assistance, the NGO CSW Forum would not be the same. They're both, Annabelle Gregg and Rachel Goro, are both in master's programs at regional universities, and they are going to moderate the youth panel entitled Making a More Just and Equitable World for Future Generations to Inherit. They will introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Pamela. Yeah, we'll just jump right in.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, please speak up. Rachel, you're muted.
Oh, no.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Can people hear me now? I'm just like closer to the computer. Okay, we can get started and hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, we'll get started. We are sort of the youth leaders and young professionals interim co-chairs. We were handed this program by Devin and Safira, so thank you both for all of your hard work in putting together this first set of Global Youth Fellows. It's such an amazing cohort this year, so we're very lucky to be joined by Marina Senamil, and I think I see Elizabeth, and ideally we will have Tendo attending as well at some point to discuss this really important topic. So I'll pass it to Rachel to begin introducing our awesome panelists here.
Hey, everyone. We have a really exciting program today, and we're so excited and thrilled to introduce our youth panelists. First, we have Marina Chicos, who's a Roma feminist and dedicated advocate for gender equality and racial justice. She's born and raised in Hungary as a Roma woman She embodies a passion for social justice that has led her to impactful professional roles. She has a master's in critical gender studies from the Central European University and is the co-founder of Feminist Collective of Romani Gender Experts, an initiative aiming to promote Roma gender equality professionals. We also have Senamil Madlala, and she is a candidate attorney at the African feminist legal organization Women's Legal Center and has a Bachelor of Laws from Stellenbosch University. As someone from a rural area in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, it has always been a priority for her to ensure the lived experiences of all women, especially those in vulnerable communities, are highlighted and amplified.
And we're also joined by Elizabeth Mendoza Maldonado. She is a feminist lawyer and human rights activist with degrees from Pontifical Catholic University of Peru Law School. She is also a legal coordinator at the NGO Hyperderecho, where she leads research projects on cybersecurity, online gender violence, and digital rights. And we will also hopefully be joined by Tendo Rachel, who is a dedicated activist affecting positive social change in Uganda through the potent fusion of media production and advocacy. She uses media as her canvas, masterfully weaving stories that illuminate societal issues that are often overlooked. And she's also worked with advocacy organizations like ActionAid, Women of Uganda Network, and Defend Defenders. So ideally we'll be joined by her as well, but we have these three wonderful panelists here today. So Rachel, you can kick us off with our first question here.
So I just wanted to start by looking back to our last panel briefly. For those of you who were able to sit in for the last panel discussion, if you have any reflections on some of the issues discussed, particularly with CSW, CEDAW, civil society, participation, and particularly from a youth perspective and informed by your own activism and advocacy and experiences. So whoever wants to take it first, we're doing this a little more informally. It's very conversational. So yeah, whoever wants to take it first can jump in.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Annabelle, for the nice introduction. I hope you can hear me, but I would like to kindly ask you to flag me if you don't hear me well, because my internet can be a bit unstable and I just turn off my camera. So first of all, I would like to thank the NGO Committee on the Status of Women for the great opportunity to take part in the fellowship. It's really a great honor and it was a really great experience. And so we are at the end of it, unfortunately. But I'm really looking forward to see the next cohort next year and to see their contribution to your work. When it comes to the previous panel, I was really glad to hear MEP Samira Raffaella when she was talking about sexual and reproductive rights and how it is important in her work to advocate for these issues. In the past few years, I've been also very active on this field, and I just conducted the research as I posted in the chat. And the reason for this is because menstrual poverty and gynecological diseases that affect women in poverty is very much underlooked, not only in the general discussions on policy levels, but also in the feminist movements, unfortunately. And I found it really tragic, to be honest, because how we can expect women to take part in political participation, or in how can we expect them to get empowered when the very basic needs are not taken care of. And menstrual poverty is a human rights violation, which we have to emphasize and we have to tackle. So I think that it should be a really crucial issue when it comes to European elections. And as Samira said, there are many political movements which are anti-gender and limiting the sexual and reproductive rights of women is a great part of their propaganda. And when it comes to the UN Secretariat General and Deputy Director for the normative support, who just shared her amazing contribution, she also emphasized that yes, it is very important to talk about and tackle poverty, but we also have to look at the effects of it and how it affects women's existence, which is sexual and reproductive rights are an integral part of. So I think we really have to focus on this. And of course, I know there will be many other topics that will be raised by my colleagues. But during this discussion, I really would like to at least raise awareness among us, because unfortunately I cannot be part of the meeting in New York. So I just hope to encourage my fellows and my colleagues here to advocate there and give a voice for the voicelessness instead of us who cannot be there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marina, and we're so glad that you're able to join us virtually today. Would anyone else like to share their reflections on the last panel?
Hi, everyone. I'm hoping that you guys can hear me clearly enough. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Just had to make. Okay. Okay, perfect. What about now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you firstly for having me, and I also think I mirror Marina's views of this has been such an incredible experience and exposure with the fellowship. And just based on what I got to listen to through the last panel, it really became clear and it really became very significant for me to say right at the beginning of CSW is that I've noticed that the importance of CSW is how it connects all of our collective struggles, because even though we come from different countries, regions, and cultures, our challenges often are far too similar because they're mostly rooted in patriarchy. And I think when we're looking at it from a youth perspective, young people are at the forefront of driving social change, but the current approach right now is that we only limited to youth engagement in terms of youth participation and consultation, and that's where we stop. However, it really reaches the level of like true youth leadership and ownership, where we invite young people to the decision-making table, and we ensure that initiatives led by the youth in their own right are honestly often conceived to be a bit marginal, and they have little or no participation by other age cohorts. So I think that's what I listened to a lot of the speakers, and I think that's the one thought that really echoed for me, is that it's important that now, with considering a substantive and intersectional approach, that we use this and apply this to meaningful youth engagement, and that we don't ignore their different unique experiences and vulnerabilities, and how that could influence and impact the conversations people will be having at CSW this year. And so I hope that this year's CSW provides an incredible opportunity for us to ensure that the lived experiences of women feed into the decisions that are being made at the highest of levels. I think that was just my small contribution.
Thank you so much, Senamil. And we absolutely, recognize that the intergenerational dialogue that needs to be taking place at high levels is so crucial. So thank you so much for highlighting that and bringing that forward. Would you like to, I don't know, Elizabeth, if you were able to join earlier, or if you were able to join just now. But if you have any reflections, we would love to hear them.
Hi everyone. Sadly, I didn't make it to the last panel, but I want to add that I share my co-fellowship partners. Their ideas are important to understand why we have to commit ourselves to try to make an engagement and to make a job about gender-based violence. It's important to try the youth to have more ideas or to have more engagement in these kind of topics, and of course in these kind of meetings and reunions. I think our voices are kind of new and are kind of we are trying to have like a whole big perspective. So that's my opinion.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Annabelle for the next question.
Sure, and I see Tendo is here too. Thank you. Thank you for
Oh,
being here.
great.
All the way from Uganda. So I'll start my question just by reiterating this year's priority theme, just because it's so in-depth. There's so many aspects to it. Accelerating the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective. So knowing that, hearing that, what comes to mind for each of you when you think of this priority theme related to your own work as activists and your personal experiences? And maybe Marina, you can start again, and we'll go in this circle.
Sure, Annabella, thank you. So I was, to be honest, very happy when I saw this year's priority, because even though women representation, political representation, gender mainstreaming, climate change, etc., are crucial topics for us, and we need to provide our attention and energies for these issues. We also have to see that poverty, even though there are so many years of working on these issues behind us, the poverty is still a crucial issue. And when it comes to sexual and reproductive health, and specifically my work of interest, we have to see that if there is no health, there is nothing. There is no education, proper education. There is no good living conditions for us. There is no mental health. There is no access to justice. So for me, it was really important to invest my efforts in researching menstrual poverty of Roma women and girls in Hungary specifically right now, because we can see that they are still suffering from not being able to buy menstrual products. They are still suffering from issues related to water justice. There is still issues with school dropouts because of the taboos, the menstrual taboos, because of fear of rejection and because of being bullied in the schools. So we can see that how poverty affects the lives of many girls and women in this regard, and because menstruation is still a crucial topic and the big taboo in most of the European countries, but I guess elsewhere as well. We can see that how it can negatively affect the lives of girls. There is a high risk of school dropouts. There is a high risk of getting gynecological diseases, which I've been also specifically looking at, for instance, how PCOS, endometriosis, how premenstrual syndromes, which are also very much connected to menstruation and period poverty. How these are interrelated with each other, and how intersectional discrimination is affecting all these lives, and also their ability and opportunities for a meaningful life and a life which everyone deserves, regardless that they are boys, they have menstruation or not, basically. So I'm really glad for this year's topic, and I hope during the meeting in New York there will be in-depth discussions, a lot of advocacy on this regard, and we can continue the fight for ending menstrual poverty, period poverty. Thank you.
Thanks, Marina. I'm glad you bring up how all of these issues are so intersectional. Like you bring up water justice, and even that impacts like reproductive health. That like if you're not getting enough water, then it often impacts your ability to menstruate. Just health is so important. There's so much I could say, but thank you. That was a really important point to bring up. Senamila, can I pass it to you? Do you have thoughts on this year's priority theme?
So the importance of this theme is for us specifically as the Women's Legal Center is like it's a multi-pronged approach that we look at. So it was very important for us to participate in it because it provided an opportunity for us to ensure that the lived experiences of women feed into the decision making at the highest level. But also it was important because we need to ensure that no one is left behind by highlighting the importance of addressing violence against women, ensuring women's access to land, housing, and property in an environment that is clean, safe, and sustainable. And it was also important because this is the spaces where we can address stereotypes about women's agencies and body autonomy and ensure that they can make decisions about access to sexual reproductive health. And lastly, it was the last goal for us was to ensure that the social security benefits, such as maternity benefits, unemployment insurance, and basic income grants are recognized as rights and not handouts. And it like this conversation, we wanted it in the space because it's one of the collective spaces where organizations, government, and other institutions may resist changing traditional working methods, but this is where we can, they are almost always the institutions that are influenced by stereotypes and norms and that constrain and maybe even exclude specifically, sorry, sorry. So these institutions are often influenced by stereotypes and norms and that constrain and exclude youth participation. So it was very important for us to have this conversation in these spaces and to basically ensure that the marginalized voices are heard and they have an equal space for places where there are decisions being taken.
Thank you. Yeah. Elizabeth, your camera popped right on. Do you have thoughts too in your work?
Yeah, thank you for the floor. I think the activism on gender issues and the search for equality is an extremely important, but also a challenging issue. It is important to emphasize that there are changes, important advances and achievements, but the path to straining the institutions and governments with a gender perspective has not yet been achieved completely. Which is why situations of gender discrimination continue to be replicated. And it is often thought that with regulation and the creation of publics, these inequalities disappear, but public policies that seek to reduce opportunity gaps are still needed. And something that I have noticed from my country, Peru, and also most Latin American countries ends up in this type of training and or awareness events, but that is not enough. It is also important to analyze what happens after the policy, what happens after the law. So after training, it is necessary to have measurements, systems for public policies and standards to have a knowledge about how we are, where we are, and if what we are doing or trying to do it's working or not. Thank you.
Yeah, those are great points. And then Tendo, I don't know if you're able to speak, but we'd love to hear your experiences in Uganda with the priority theme.
Is it okay to make a comment here? No, okay. Never knew how it works, sorry. Copy.
That's okay. We might have time at the end. I know we're just on a time constraint. Sorry. Rachel, I'll pass it to you to ask the next question.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for sharing. I think kind of following up on some of the things that you raised, my question for you all is what do you think are some of the biggest obstacles at each level, whether that's personal, local, national, international, to achieving some of these goals of gender equality and creating and shaping a more just world for future generations? And how is your own work informing your thoughts on this question. So I just want to hear from your own advocacy experiences what you think are some of those obstacles and how to overcome them.
Maybe I can jump in again. Yeah. So while I was thinking about this question, I really had to reflect on my experiences and what are those things which I think are really important. I think when it comes to youth participation at any levels, basically one of the biggest issue is that we are infantilized. We are looked at as children when we are at the table, even though we could have, many years of experience already, because most of us who are really uh, committed to gender equality and justice, we started as volunteers in our teenage years. So actually, there is a serious commitment and also professional experience behind us, even though we are just 25 or 30 years old. So I found it really difficult to argue with the middle-aged or aging white men, when they do not want to listen to me. So of course you have to find advocacy strategies which work even with them. This is one of the things that I would like to mention, but another one also related to menstrual poverty, period poverty, is that because there are many issues which do not directly affect men, heterosexual men. That's why it is very hard for them to understand why menstruation poverty is an issue, because it will never affect them. They will never understand how it feels, to wake up for bleeding, having cramps, and being not able to wake up from your bed, but still have to go to work. You still have to take care of your children, to take care of a whole household. They will never understand this, of course, because of obvious biological reasons. So I think for us advocates, we have to find ways to explain to them, and also to find our allies among the men, among also the LGBTQ community who are maybe more sensitive for such topics, so that we can work on this together. And yes, also when it comes to policy making, we have to find these allies, because just recently I saw a TikTok video, and there was this liberal politician from the opposition in Hungary, who is very strong on combating menstrual poverty here in Hungary. And she shared that out of 30 politicians, there were maybe two or three who supported her recommendation. And I think out of three, two were women. So there were not really also, of course, women representation at the table. This really shows. Yeah, this really shows why it is so important and so crucial to have women at the table, because they can understand the issues and causes that we are striving for. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. I really like the points that you're raising, and I think everything you just said kind of demonstrates how women, and especially young women, are sort of put in a position where you have to get creative. You have to look at ways of collaborating and moving through channels that might not be the main channel that you would typically think to advocate through, which can sometimes lead to, more movement building and more, collaboration. So yeah, thank you. Senamil, do you have any thoughts on this question?
Yes. So in terms of an obstacle, as someone who works in an NGO space a lot and in civil sector spaces a lot, one of our biggest problems is that we tend to always work in silos. So one person is working there, another one is working over there, and there's not a lot of harmonization and unity in the things that we do. So specifically, if I'm going to speak towards the youth and the intergenerational issues, I'd say that what I've experienced also is that perhaps the adults work on their own and then the youth know better, and then there's not enough learning from one another and learning from one another's experience. What I think we could work on, how we could potentially solve something like that, would be recognizing the power imbalances between the adults and the youth in terms of how can we create and cultivate equitable relationships. I think that if we specifically worked with the youth, with diverse youth who may require patience due to the differences in language and working styles and interests, we could see a lot more harmonization, and we could see a lot more collaboration that is successful. I think that because the youth tends to be so critical as well of the older generation, that we sort of ignore the valuable lessons of how to organize one another, how to draft policy. So we miss a lot of traditional lessons we could have learned from people who have been a part of the sector for a long time. And the older generation also misses out on engaging in the youth, because then they don't find out interesting ways to really engage in society. The way we used to address issues in 2004 cannot be the same way we address issues in 2024. And I think with the rapid globalization and the rapid improvements of technological spaces and technology, it's important that both parties work towards a similar goal, but also recognize the benefit that each party brings to those goals. I think also there's like, so yeah, that is just the one thing. I think we'd also, it's important. Another challenge would be how the youth sort of currently lack adequate voices in economic and political matters, and and yet they have to lead in a few years' time for this better world. So I think it's important that we capitalize on global youth movements, and they need to be amplified and assisted in any way that they could be. So I think just a simple solution is bringing the young people to the table. I feel like I'm going to keep saying this, but yeah, bringing the young people to the table and scaling them, which I think the older generation have done beautifully and marvelously before. So I think they could assist with the more technical points that we can't ignore the experience that they have in that. So I think that's the biggest obstacle for me, is how we all are working in silos for issues that require a community effort. That makes sense.
Yes, and it certainly takes a village. And I think that having those two perspectives, as you say, is so crucial. We need that synergy because the older generations have experience, but young people have the fresh perspectives that we need to really push forward. Thank you so much for that. Elizabeth.
Thank you, Rachel. I was thinking about this question because I think it's a little bit tricky to try to summarize the problems that we can find, but I think the main obstacles from my field of work tend to be participation spaces where women are heard, but not only that we are heard, we need to have the opportunity to make a statement and also are taken into account, not only for to meet a specific quotes. And another obstacle that I think it's important to say is that understanding work and its implications in the professional world. Women are expected to be professionals, have an important work duties, but many times the actions that a woman must perform are overjudged and overloaded. It is like if you are a female leader, you must show that you deserve it. Like you have to show your capacity, and even if we have this capacity, we have to show and prove why we deserve to be in some spots. And additionally, I believe that one of the main obstacles it's to understand that we not only that we don't have like the opportunity to live a life free of violence because of machismo and ideas and patriarchal conceptions are still in force. But also once we suffer and survive from situations of violence, we live experiences of re-victimization from the states when we decide to report discouragement of complaints, situations of harassment, questioning the victim, and some other ideas like when we try to report these kind of cases. And I think the way to in which we can treat these kind of problems is mainly to recognize that they exist. It's important to have this idea of this is what it is now, and only by identifying this kind of problems we can specific measures be sought. So I think it's important to name what are the problems, and after that we can try to focus on some solutions.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Visibility, absolutely very important. I don't know if we have Tendo, if she can jump in.
Technical difficulties, I think.
Okay. Yeah, then I'll just pass it over to you, Annabelle, for the next question.
Awesome. I think we have a little, I think we could take one question from the audience. So if I see a hand go up instantly, that will be who we call. I know we had someone that wanted to ask a question earlier, so maybe if they want to come back and ask it now.
That was Sheila Katzman.
Sheila, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I ran off and came back on. I am not going to ask you a question because my question was answered. I just want to applaud you all. I just want to applaud you for the work you are doing and for the voices you are bringing to this forum. It's just absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you, NGO CSW. This is fantastic.
Well, thank you, Sheila. Yeah, our Global Youth Fellows are really doing some great work of representing the youth of the world. They're from all over. And we're so happy to get to hear their perspectives today. I think to close it out then, I'll ask our panelists if you could
Ivy has her hand up.
Sorry. Oh, Ivy, of course.
Yes, actually, I was struck by what Senamila was saying about, what worked in 2004 may not work in 2024. I'm like, oh my gosh, this seems like yesterday for older people, for me, but it's 20 years, that's like you're not an adolescent anyway. So really what's your view on co-leadership or intergenerational leadership, or have you had any success with it? Do you have any good lessons or lessons learned that you'd like to share with us on that, so that we can really strengthen that intergenerational collaboration?
I think any of you can jump in if you have thoughts.
Maybe okay. Sanabila, do you want? Okay, thank you. I would rather talk about what kind of intergenerational co-leadership I would like to see. For me, mentoring has been also always an integral part of my life, and I couldn't be here. I couldn't have education without my mentors, the older generation, who really supported me and showed me guidance. Because I come from a family where my parents didn't have an education, so I had no one in my family or in my closer environment who could help me in terms of choosing university or telling me some good advice in my life. So I think mentoring is a really important part of youth leadership or becoming leaders in our communities. But it doesn't it shouldn't be something which is too direct. It should be a guidance so that the young people live through their experiences, their mistakes as well. You know, they can flourish their characters, their dreams. So I really would like to see more intergenerational mentorship in institutions, and I think the UN Women should be an integral part of it, because this is one of the biggest organizations working for gender equality. So I really would like to see more mentorship programs so that we can learn from each other.
Yes, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Samuel. I was just passing
Okay.
to you.
Yeah, I think I want to specifically add to Marina, and I think Elizabeth also said something similar. As a young Black woman, there's always this need to be very perfect and to present like a very capable body of work, for example. And in the organization I work in, because NGOs are not as funded as every other spaces, you tend to take on work that you ordinarily wouldn't if it was a much more corporate environment. For example, if it was a normal law firm versus a law center. And the one thing that really I gained confidence in is to create a space of learning for a young person, but to balance that by also giving them a level of authority to design and implement any sort of policy and process. Any submissions we make, they'll give it to the young person to draft first, to do a first draft, so that one, you learn that, okay, your ideas are valuable and they have value, and it's fine if it's just the first draft, and you will always learn if you really meaningfully engage with the document, for example. So I think that's very important when we're speaking on an intergenerational collaborative approach, where we know that the young person there isn't there to make photocopies. They're there to genuinely contribute to the work that you're doing. And I think with doing that, there's a confidence and a repertoire that is built between the two people. And you really get to, and that's where really a lot of good work is done, and a lot of proper, as Ivy said, co-leadership is done, where I learn from you. I recognize also what I've learned from you, but I also see that this is also what I managed to contribute, which is, I think it's a confidence building thing. And it really shows that there's enough for me. You respect what I have to bring and I get to learn from you. I think that's the main thing that I wanted to contribute to that part, to your question.
That's such a creative idea for co-leadership. Like the youth write the first draft, we have ideas and we're fresh, and then our mentors help us make it a reality. That's a really creative way to do that. I like that. Elizabeth, if you have thoughts too, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, thank you. As my colleagues have already mentioned it in their review interventions, I think it's extremely important to have these kind of discussion spaces where we can express our ideas, but also where we can listen and learn from our partners. And for example, their experiences, their strategies, what has worked for them and what has not. It's not only a space for sharing ideas, I think it's mainly for learning. And I think this is the kind of things that we need to start youth engagement. Yeah.
Really great points. I know we're so close to time, but I think that we can wrap it up by I want to give you all a chance to give our wonderful global audience here one thing to take away from this. Like if there was one thing that you would want everyone to hear, one sentence that you'd want everyone in the audience to remember, what would it be? So much pressure, but Marina, I'll have you start.
Oh, that's a difficult task, I would say, because I think all of us came with important topics and advocacy points that those of you who will be in person at the meeting should really take forward. And what I would say as a last word is that we have to end menstrual poverty in order to empower young girls and give them at least, just the very opportunity to live their lives how they want and getting education and etc.
Great. Sanamila?
I think first I'd note that this is for some of us, this is a very important year. It's an election year. And I want us all, to not give up and to be intentional about what we're fighting for and the social change we all want to bring, even though it seems as if the world is on fire. We need to be intentional about what we're doing about that. So yeah, I think that's literally it. Intentionality is what I'm trying to bring forward.
Intentional hope. I like it. Elizabeth, you're closing us out.
I think the main idea that I would like to highlight is not only about opportunities to have these spaces, it's also about trying to train young people to understand why it is important to start talking and start worrying about these kind of topics, because after all, it's our future that we are trying to discuss and trying to change. So I think it's very crucial for us to start this kind of engagement and also to learn from people that already have had started this fight. And as my co-fellow said, I think it's the time to be more aware of what are we doing with our lives and what can we expect for our future.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And it looks like Tendo, I know has been having trouble, but did put in one final takeaway in the chat that I'll read. Totally agree to implementing intersectional approaches and lenses in our advocacy efforts. Intersectional not only allows us to relate with everyone at their point of need, but also helps us not to overestimate our audiences. We all should implement intersectional approaches to our work. Thank you so much to our fellows for being here. It was such an insightful, interesting conversation. And we're really excited to, promote all of the amazing work that you all are doing. Rachel, do you have any closing thoughts before we?
I mean, yeah, just echoing that, you're all so impressive, incredible young people. And we're so excited to have you with us. And we look forward to the rest of the next 2 weeks with you, with this forum and all the advocacy work that you're able to accomplish.
And with that, I think we'll pass it to our fearless co-chairs. But thanks again to our fellows for being here and chatting with us.
Thank you so much, Annabelle, Rachel, and all the panelists, Elizabeth, Sanamile, and Tendo. I'm kind of juggling a few things at the same. I wanted to make sure everyone has the full list of the 20 fellows as well. So the link is in the chat. So thank you again very much. And the intentional hope, I'd love to carry that forward with me throughout the next 2 weeks. And throughout the year, actually. So before we end, we wanted to share some highlights of the NGO CSW Forum that we don't want you to miss. And so one of them is, if you have a UN badge, you can join the civil society briefings in conference room 4 every day other than the first and last day. So the 11th and 22nd, we will not have a briefing. But all other days from 1:15 to 2, we will have civil society briefings. And the topics of these briefings will include CSW negotiations, of course, but in addition, in an effort to make linkages between the various UN processes that work on gender equality and that also crucially need a gender perspective, we're covering topics such as the Summit of the Future, CEDAW, gender experts, other commissions, the high-level political forum, and even more than that. And so we've kind of outlined them to you on our calendar. Hopefully you've received that. We did send that out. And they will mostly be available on web TV. I can't guarantee every single one, but most of those briefings will definitely be on web TV. So you can join from anywhere. You don't have to physically be in the conference room. So I'm now, Pamela, do you want to name others?
Pamela, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I lost my mouse, but I found it.
That's cute. The mouse is running around all over the place.
Thank you, Ivy. I certainly do. They are the Armenian Cultural Center activities. The first week, which includes healing and community space, the artisan fair, and exhibit booths. In addition, regional caucuses are held in person the first week, Monday and Tuesday, in the Church Center Chapel, and they're held virtually the second week. Virtual conversation circles focused on poverty and social justice, which, by the way, will be for the first time held in 4 languages: Arabic, English, French, and Spanish. And that's only for the Poverty and Social Justice Conversation Circle. Other conversation circles include finance, climate change, gender bias and economic policy, and debt crisis and its impact on women. Education closes out the conversation circles the second week of CSW.
So this concludes our program. Thank you so much for joining us at Consultation Day, the 68th session. Next year is Beijing Plus 30. We look forward to seeing you during the course of the next 2 weeks. So goodbye. As our tradition, we're going to unmute. You can unmute yourself and say whatever you like. Positive words.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Bye.
Good job.
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Connecting from
Thank
Thailand.
you.
All the positive energy from Thailand.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Asante sana. Asante sana. Wote na binonyo.
Ciao.